Hi, it's Earth Computer, and today I want to show you something really easy you can do with the new RNG manipulation. Inside this dispenser is an unbreaking 3 flint and steel, and what you would expect if I press this button is that there's a 1 in 4 chance that the flint and steel would take some durability damage when it sets this block alight. But because of RNG manipulation, that's not the case. We press this button and the block sets alight, and if we look inside, the flint and steel has no damage, and we can do this as many times as we like, as long as we save in between, as you just saw, and this flint and steel will never take damage. After all that, the flint and steel is still undamaged, as you can see. So one use for this would be to make a nether portal lighter which never runs out. So if you didn't know, you can light a nether portal with the flint and steel inside the dispenser. Previously, these kind of lighters have had the slight issue, not a huge deal, but a slight issue that these will eventually run out. You can also use fire chargers, but obviously they run out too. But now here's a design which never runs out ever. So you want to start by placing your dispenser. I've just placed mine here, and inside it you want to place your Unbreaking 3 flint and steel. Next you want to place in your user input. What's important about this is that you don't power anything directly with the user input, always use a repeater in between, because user input can mess with timings. Next you want to go out a number of chunks from where you are, and that number of chunk corresponds to your render distance. So my render distance is 12, so I've gone out 12 chunks. And I've replaced the button with a redstone torch so that we can see where the redstone power will run out. So I'm just going to go 15 blocks here. And the power runs out here. So when the power runs out, you want to build an instant repeater. So to do that, you place a block, then you place a sticky piston, and then a redstone block, and then underneath the redstone block you place a sticky piston like this so that it grabs this block, and then you place a block here, and then you continue the redstone line like this, and you keep doing that until you reach the end. Once you reach the end, you place a repeater on 2 ticks facing towards the chunk that you want to load. There should be a 1 block air gap in between, and this repeater on 2 ticks will load this chunk. So with this one last piece of redstone dust here, that's already it, and you're finally done. So to test it out, first make sure that the chunk over there is unloaded by pressing escape. And then, well, in single player escape works, in multiplayer you have to do save all, but in single player you press escape, and then you press this button, and let's see if the flint and steel, it didn't break. So if I were to press this button any number of times, as long as I press escape in between, this flint and steel should never break. Let's try it again. But there's a 1 in 4 chance that this flint and steel, every time you test it, it should be breaking by 1. Even though it's got Unbreaking 3, it should act as if it hasn't got Unbreaking. And that's actually a good thing. That means that you filter this up correctly, it's just that you're in the wrong area. And there is a way you can solve that, luckily. So if you're unlucky enough to be in an area where the flint and steel breaks every time, what you have to do, you have to replace this redstone dust here with a comparator, and I didn't mean to break that. Comparator, and then you want to go way out here. and turn this repeater to 3 ticks rather than 2, and you want to go all the way back. And here you want to place your so-called RNG advancer. So you place a repeater there on 1 tick, and you place a block in front of him with a redstone dust on top. And now this next bit is directional, so we need to be facing in the X direction, and it doesn't matter, either X direction works, but not in the Z direction. And then you'd have a dropper facing upwards, and then a dropper facing sideways on top of that, and then a hopper here facing into the bottom dropper, and 1 item inside. And that's already it. So if you had an area with the flint steel that broke, now hopefully it shouldn't break. So let's test this out. Let me turn off the debug screen and press this, and look inside, and it doesn't break. In the very unlikely event that the flint and steel still breaks every time, even though you have an advancer, luckily you can have any number of advancers like this. So I have 4 here and they stack. So if I would press this button, the flint and steel doesn't break, which is great. So the way this works is the flint and steel in here uses the world RNG to decide whether it will take damage or not. And immediately before we trigger this dispenser, we load that chunk way over there so that the world RNG is reset. So whenever we trigger this dispenser, it's already predetermined whether it will take damage or not. And we just need to find the right area in the world so that it doesn't take damage. Or we can use the so-called RNG advances, which happen in between loading the chunk and triggering the dispenser. So we load the chunk, then advance the RNG a couple of times deliberately, and then we use the flint and steel. This dispenser will trigger in the same game tick as the repeater over there, and since they have the same delay, a dispenser has a 4 game tick delay, and that repeater on 2 ticks over there also has a 4 game tick delay. But since repeaters activate before everything else, that chunk over there is also loaded before this repeater is triggered. So when we have advancers, we have this repeater here powering them, and we have a comparator here powering the dispenser, and we have the repeater over there on 3 ticks rather than 2. Now, since repeaters power before comparators, or before everything, as I said earlier, these droppers are going to get powered before this dispenser. Therefore, they will trigger first, and that's important because we want to advance the RNG before we actually use it. So now that these droppers are going to trigger before the dispenser, what about the chunk over there? Well, like before, on the same game tick that these droppers and this dispenser trigger, that repeater over there also triggers, and since repeaters trigger first again, the chunk's loaded first, and then this happens. So I hope you liked this video. I will be coming out with more RNG manipulation videos in the future, hopefully an explanation video soon, but it is exam period for me, so I don't have all the time in the world, so it won't be coming out tomorrow or anything. But yeah, thanks for watching.